You are watching In Your Interest, and first up, the big story we're taking up is the rising pollution levels in the national capital Delhi and the national capital region around it. Air pollution, a problem that everybody in Delhi and the national capital region feels at this time of the year. But very few really talk about what kind of economic impact it has in terms of the hidden costs it brings to daily life. On the 23rd of October, the Supreme Court of India came down heavily on the central government and the state governments, criticizing them for making our environmental laws practically toothless. The court highlighted how the penalties for crop stubble burning outlined in the Commission for Air Quality Management Act of 2021 have not been enforced properly at all. To put it in simple words, the laws are there, but the machinery to implement them is completely missing. The government has promised that penalties will be implemented in 10 days, but the damage is already done. The Supreme Court of India also criticized the state governments of Punjab and Haryana, questioning them as to why stubble burning continues if there are supposed to be consequences. Despite registering over 1,000 FIRs against offenders, Punjab has only collected fines from 473 people. The big question that remains: who exactly is paying the price? Well, the answer is simple: you, me, and everyone living in and around Delhi. For the day, Delhi's air quality was recorded as quote-unquote very poor, a figure that shows up on your app, but the real impact shows up in your wallet. Masks, air purifiers, medical visits, the costs just keep adding up. In fact, a study by Safar found that by simply following air quality guidelines, Delhiites could save up to over 1,000 crore rupees annually in healthcare costs. But here's the catch: an air purifier can cost anywhere between 10 to 15,000 rupees. For a city with an average per capita income of around 2,72,000 rupees per year, that's no small expense. And for those with respiratory issues, the financial burden is even higher. And to make matters worse, even government ministries are feeling the heat. An RTI revealed that 6 central government ministries in Delhi spent 50 lakh rupees on air purifiers in just one financial year. And guess what? That's taxpayers' money, which is your money, my money. Air pollution is not just an environmental issue. It's an economic one, with Indian businesses losing 7 trillion rupees annually. At the end of the day, it's the people, especially the vulnerable, who are left to pay the price. We have some very special guests joining us to help us understand what's going on. We have Dr. Srinath Sridharan, policy researcher and corporate advisor. Srinath, we keep talking about this all the time, and nothing has changed this year as well. And even the top court of this country is saying the same thing.
Hi, this is a very sad incident, right? It repeats. Behavior has not changed. Behavior of the governments, the policyholders, the state governments who promised heaven and earth, nothing has changed. And while you spoke about the economic impact of it, the reality is the quality of life that suffers and the health issues and the people, what we go through is health. It's almost like smoking a couple of packets of cigarettes a day. Imagine kids, youngsters, senior citizens who are actually growing up there in CR. And I think pollution as a word itself doesn't feature in the importance of any of the Indian governments, the state as well, state governments as well. We tend to think that it can be solved by conversations, it can be solved by penalties. It won't be. In this case, we're speaking about, let's say, air pollution. But what about noise pollution? That's something that, again, that we have in India all across. So the sad part about it needs the attention of the Supreme Court. But let me flip it the other way around. Okay, the Supreme Court tomorrow says, I'm going to penalize the state. Do you think the state is actually going to change, or just simply sign that check and say, okay, we have penalized me 5 crore rupees? And that's my worry. Everybody wants to claim that they're acting on something, but nothing has changed behaviorally. Of course, I'm very fair to be saying that all of us have to change in our behavior. But reality is, it is not seeming to be a policy priority at all.
We also have Mr. Lloyd Mathias now joining us. Lloyd, great to have you on the show. You are from Delhi and the National Capital Region. You work, live around here. And so do I. And we keep having this conversation year after year. And what we have to say, it's as if the Supreme Court of India just pulled the words out of our heads.
Absolutely, Krishna. I think it's tragic that year on year we have the same woes, we repeat the same issues. I think pollution in Delhi is not a new occurrence. It's been happening over the last decade. I think the last few years it's gotten to a very critical state when actually for a lot of people uh, it's asking a very existential question. Do we want to continue to live in the national capital region and subject ourselves to an obvious health hazards, ourselves and our families? Or are there any other better places where we can move to? And I think when it comes to this stage, I think it's a crisis. And I completely agree with what Srinath said. I think our administrators and political authorities have been toying with this for too long. I think this is a state of emergency, right? This is not something that will just go by after a week or two. I think this is an annual occurrence, right? Come every November, we see the same problem, and all the things we know are not new, right? Delhi is landlocked. You have this farmers burning stubble all around. This, coupled with atmospheric conditions, Delhi's large percentage of vehicular population, I think this makes it critical year on year. And it's tragic that every year we're doing the same thing with absolutely zero accountability. And it's not about pointing fingers to any political party. I think our entire political establishment, whether it's the central government, whether it's the state government, whether it's the states in the vicinity of Delhi, I think are all answerable. And I just think, if this doesn't change, I think Delhi or the national capital will lose its competitive edge. Right today, businesses have been relocating here the last 2 decades, from Bombay and from elsewhere in the country. I think we're about to see the change in the situation. People are generally going to be looking at options to move out of the NCR if we are not going to, solve this issue soon enough.
All right, that's what we're discussing over here. The economic impact of pollution, which starts from individuals losing money on an annual basis to healthcare costs and buying air purifiers and other things to deal with the pollution, to businesses losing money. Then you have times when work and productivity gets hit and businesses get hit consequently, and overall the GDP of Delhi and the national capital region gets hit simply because they haven't found a solution to a critical problem.
And I think in that sense, pollution at one level is a basic hygiene issue, right? It's basically about concerning people's lives. Everything else in terms of, enhancing quality of business, better, taxation, I think all that comes much later. I think this is an absolute base ladder of any economy, right? If you don't get basic infrastructure and right, which is basic pollution, basic law and order, I think everything else doesn't matter. And I think that's the issue that I think our administrators haven't understood. And I seriously think for a lot of businesses, this is going to be a question that they're going to ask themselves. I do know of a couple of businesses that have effectively relocated, right? They moved out of the national capital region. I think it's a matter of time before this becomes an exodus. And therefore, I think to solve it, it would take much more than just the anguish of citizens. I think all policymakers, large builders, industry, all have come together and have to address this issue on a war footing.
All right, Srinath, you're talking about essentially what is an agricultural issue impacting, one of the startup hubs of this country. Startups and companies want to move out of Delhi NCR region because a solution to disposing of agricultural waste has not been found. You had the MS Swaminathan report which spoke about the better ways of disposing, farm waste. Clearly, none of that has been taken up, and it has been the issue has been allowed to fester to the point where it has reached a critical crisis mode.
I want to make 2 points here, Krishna. It is true that almost agriculture and agriculturalists are a very politically sensitive, touch-me-not cohort. Anything around them, we seem to kind of shy away without taking a strong stance. That's one. Two, I think to Lloyd's point, I want to just add, he's right in saying that I think businesses are relocating. If you look at Bombay, Bangalore, NCR, the civic infrastructure is collapsing. The quality of life is terrible. We all keep speaking about pollution of various sorts, traffic jams, and essentially poor quality of life. And which comes to the question that I have in mind. Is it our economic handcuffs that in hope of earning more and living in those cities that we're actually worried about environmental degradation? And this kind of urgency doesn't seem to affect anybody in policy and polity at all. Everybody gives very grand looking statements year on year, signs a report, whether it's in the parliament or the assembly or think tanks, but yet nothing happens. And why is it? I think it is simple. Our government's not accountable to promising quality of life. If it means taking stern action against agriculturalists, I think that's the challenge. It's a holy grail. How do we overcome that policy inertia around agriculturalists? I think we all need to figure out, is there a political angle because it's a vote bank and nobody wants to touch? Or is it really the respect for the annadatas that we keep talking about?
Lloyd, one last question with you before I wrap this discussion up. Tell us what can be done from here on, because this is a problem that is not just about the citizens, anguished citizens complaining. This is a problem from where business money from could be drained out of Delhi and the National Capital Region.
Was this for me, Krishna?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, like I said, the first thing is, everyone needs to come together and define clearly what are the clear action steps. We clearly understand that one of the big instigators, one of the big issues really is about stubble burning, which is true. But I think there are other factors that come into play. I can tell you all across NCR, construction dust is a big area, right? We just know the levels of construction happening in a lot of these places. I think that's a big contributor. I think to some extent, whatever one says, I think vehicular pollution is also something that's pretty significant. And then, of course, coming in the festive season, I know it gets very sensitive, but you still have miscreants who, despite whatever firecracker ban, will still go ahead. I think lastly, as the Delhi winter approaches, you have loads of private security guards outside very fancy homes, where you have these people lighting up rubber tires, anything to keep them warm. I think a combination of all this is what's getting together. And until there are strict laws in place that prohibit some of these things. So one is working severely with farmers in finding out alternate modes of disposal, and maybe even compensating them for things that they would use otherwise as the remains of this burning that they would use. I think that's one. But also to take into cognizance things like construction dust, rampant vehicular pollution. I think all these things need to be addressed in a manner where anything above AQI of 150 or 200 creates a sense of panic. Today, we're kind of learning to live at 400 as just another day. We're sending kids to school in what can actually take a toll on their lives.
Absolutely. We're okay with air quality levels at 350 to 400. Some people are even doing their early morning walks and exercises outside in the open. That's how used to we've become to pollution. Let's hope that we don't have to be for a very long time.